A bowl of clam chowder does not look like the kind of thing people would fight over. It looks warm, thick, familiar, the sort of meal meant to soften a cold day rather than start an argument. And yet this humble soup has inspired fierce regional loyalty and even an attempt to police what belongs in it. That is what makes it worth looking at closely. Clam chowder is not just a comfort food. It is a dish that absorbed history, migration, place, and pride until a simple bowl began to feel like something people needed to defend. So how did a practical shellfish stew become a symbol of identity? To answer that, we have to begin before it meant any of that. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. Before it was defended, it was just useful. Long before clam chowder became tied to American coastal identity, the basic idea behind it was taking shape in Europe. The word chowder is often linked to an old French term for a large cooking pot, the kind fishermen might have used to make a shared stew from the day's catch. Along the coasts of France and England, sailors and laborers combined seafood with water, herbs, and hard biscuits to create meals that were filling, economical, and easy to cook in one pot. These early stews were not trying to express culture or tradition. They were solving a simpler problem: how to turn limited ingredients into something hot, hearty, and sustaining. That is how many iconic foods begin. Before people protect them as heritage, they first exist as practical answers to ordinary conditions. America did not invent the idea, but it changed the ingredient. When European settlers reached New England in the 17th and 18th centuries, they did not arrive with a finished recipe called clam chowder. What they brought was a cooking habit. Make a substantial meal from what the environment provides. And along the rocky New England coastline, the environment provided clams in abundance. They were easy to gather, available year-round, and well-suited to communities living close to cold water and hard seasonal conditions. So the old logic remained, but the ingredients shifted into local form. Early American clam chowder was typically made with clams, salt pork, onions, water, and hardtack or crackers. It was simple, sturdy, and deeply practical, a meal built to satisfy hunger rather than impress anyone. That is often why certain foods last. They fit the place that adopts them so well that they stop feeling borrowed and start feeling native. The moment chowder stopped being only practical, but a dish becomes more than durable once people begin to care not only that it works, but how it should be made. For clam chowder, one of the biggest turning points was dairy. As milk or cream entered the pot, the dish took on a thicker, softer, and richer character. What had once been mainly sustaining now also felt deeply comforting. The soup became heavier and warmer, the kind of food that seemed especially suited to cold weather and long winters by the sea. Over time, this creamy version came to define what many people picture when they hear the words clam chowder. It became New England clam chowder, with its pale base and unmistakable sense of familiarity. That shift matters because a single ingredient can change more than flavor. It can change the emotional identity of a dish. Chowder was becoming something tied to memory and place. Tomatoes did more than change the taste, and once one version begins to feel like the proper one, another version almost inevitably appears to challenge that claim. Manhattan clam chowder did exactly that. Instead of milk or cream, this version used tomatoes, creating a soup that was lighter, tangier, and brighter in flavor. It likely emerged under the influence of immigrant communities in New York, where food traditions mixed more freely and adaptation was part of everyday life. From one angle, it was simply another regional variation. From another, it felt like a direct contradiction of what clam chowder had come to mean in New England. That is why the reaction was so strong. To traditionalists, tomatoes did not just alter the taste, they altered the identity of the dish itself. In 1939, that feeling became so intense that a bill was introduced in the Maine legislature to outlaw the addition of tomatoes to clam chowder. It never passed, but the proposal reveals something important. People were not arguing only about ingredients, they were arguing about definition. At some point, chowder stopped being only food. By then, clam chowder had become more than a recipe. In New England, the creamy version came to feel inseparable from cold weather, fishing communities, coastal life, and an inherited idea of home. Its richness suited the climate, but it also suited memory. It felt rooted, familiar, and local in a way that made it easy to defend. Manhattan clam chowder suggested something different. Its tomato base reflected a city shaped by immigration, movement, and layered influences rather than the preservation of one dominant culinary identity. That contrast is what makes the argument around chowder so revealing. People often think they are defending taste, when in fact they are defending a way of seeing themselves. A regional dish can become shorthand for belonging, a way of saying this is how we do things here, and by extension, this is who we are. Regional variation is not the exception, it is the story. And once a dish carries that much meaning, it rarely stays divided into only two recognizable forms. Clam chowder did not stop with the contrast between New England and Manhattan. In Rhode Island, another version developed with a clear broth, leaving out both cream and tomatoes altogether. That choice produces something lighter and more restrained, a chowder that lets the natural flavor of the clams come through more clearly. Elsewhere, corn chowder introduced sweetness, and later adaptations brought in spice or other modern touches. None of this is unusual. It is what we should expect from any food that lives long enough across different regions and generations. The more familiar a dish becomes, the more naturally it branches. So the most interesting question is not which version is universally correct, it is why each place finds its own version convincing. A dish people gathered around. But clam chowder does not live only in recipes, it also lives in the occasions built around it. By the 19th century, chowder houses and seaside inns had turned the dish into part of public life, especially in coastal communities where seafood was both livelihood and local pride. Clam bakes and chowder festivals pushed that even further. They transformed the meal into an experience, something tied not just to hunger but to atmosphere, season, and shared memory. That matters because foods become symbolic in more than one way. Ingredients matter and recipes matter, but repetition in social life matters too. A dish starts to represent a place when people return to it together, compare versions, argue over it, and keep building memories around it over time. Even today, annual chowder competitions in New England continue that tradition, drawing crowds who want not only to eat but to judge what the dish should be. When a local food became national, then, in the 20th century, clam chowder entered another phase entirely. It became portable. Canned chowder allowed the dish to travel far beyond the coastal communities that had shaped it. People who lived nowhere near fishing towns or fresh shellfish could now buy a shelf-stable version from a store, heat it at home, and treat it as part of ordinary American food life. In one sense, that made the dish less local. It no longer depended on the shoreline, the catch of the day, or the habits of a specific region. But in another sense, it made clam chowder more culturally powerful than ever. Purists could object because canned versions often felt flatter, less fresh, and further removed from tradition. Still, wide availability is part of how a regional food becomes a national one. Once a dish spreads that far, the question changes. It becomes how much of its original identity can survive once it is available almost everywhere. The 5-second rule for choosing the right one. After all those branches, the practical question returns. If you only have a few seconds to choose, here is the simplest rule. If you want the fullest comfort food experience, thick, rich, creamy, and warming, choose New England clam chowder. If you want something lighter, brighter, and more acidic, choose Manhattan clam chowder. And if you want the clam flavor to come through more clearly, without cream or tomato taking over, Rhode Island clam chowder makes the most sense. There is no single version that is right for everyone. There is only the version that best matches the feeling you want from the bowl. Simple dishes become important when people attach belonging to them that, in the end, is the larger pattern hidden inside clam chowder. It began as a practical fisherman's stew in Europe, a way to turn whatever the sea provided into something hot and sustaining. In America, it changed because the coastline changed, the ingredients changed, and the people making it changed. New England gave it clams in abundance and later gave it cream. New York gave it a tomato-based form shaped by a more mixed and mobile city. Other regions kept reshaping it again. Its history shows that tradition is not something that simply survives untouched. It is something communities keep selecting, preserving, and redefining over time. The version people call original is often not just the earliest one. It is the one they decide still represents them. That is why arguments about food can become so intense. People are rarely talking only about taste. They are also talking about memory, place, and the quiet desire to say this is ours. Whether chowder comes in a bowl, a bread loaf, or beside oyster crackers, it carries more than flavor. It carries belonging. If this video changed the way you think about clam chowder, subscribe to Secrets of Simple Things for more stories hidden inside ordinary things. Sometimes the most familiar foods carry the deepest history.